let me introduce my panel first. Okay. So let me introduce Chitra Stern, who's the incoming, I think it's called, president of EO in Portugal. Chitra, I've known for a few years and is a good friend, and has put together some amazing projects here in Portugal, and naturally also won some awards both internationally and nationally for her entrepreneurship. You might know her through Martinhal Group, through the events she organizes around entrepreneurship and women entrepreneurship as well, but also more recently the stuff she's done for the Portuguese government, you know, getting herself a Portuguese medal as well one day, hopefully. And finally, the fact that she's just launched an international school as well, all in the middle of the greatest pandemic of the planet. So crazy or entrepreneur, we can decide later on that one. Yeah. So welcome, Chitra, for that one.
Thank you.
I'd also like to say hello to Filipa. Filipa is the founder and CEO of Wink. So basically making people beautiful, and probably the person here who's been hit hardest, I would say, by the crisis, apart from Chitra, in terms of, you know, you need to go to these places, you need to go to shopping centers, etc., to work things out. From what I've understood, Wink already has 35 stores in Portugal, 16 in Brazil, 2 in Spain, and 1 in Angola. So already an international organization. It's going to be really interesting to get your feedback as how you as a leader have dealt through this process. Yeah. José Covas here, a real estate person for over 23 years, from what I've understood, José, teaches it, works with it, and is the managing director of Aura Re here in Portugal, but also on the board, from what I've understood, of Aura Re in Spain, Italy, and in Greece. Yeah, has worked all his life in real estate, teaches it as well. So it's going to be interesting to see the impact this has and where we see real estate going. You know, half the people keep telling me we'll need half the office space from now on. But on the other hand, we're going to need bigger houses if you're going to make me work from home. So I have no idea, but maybe you can enlighten us on how that's working and how you feel the market's going to shift. Yeah. Then Ferri Enthoven in agriculture. A big thank you to Ferri, because my fridge is still full. So clearly things were working here. Works for Atlantic, you know, born into an agriculture family, founder of Atlantic Growers here in Portugal in Odmira, and basically employs over 200 people with high technology, supplying all kinds of vegetables to UK, Holland, Germany, and Scandinavia, and also, from what I understood, code generation as well, and energy generation. And finally, Nuno Guerra, the founder and CEO of Create IT. I've known Nuno for a few years now. It had to be the IT guy who sits with headphones, of course, with his logo behind him. And again, Nuno has been really interesting to talk to. Spoke to my MBA students last year with really great feedback. You know, very solid business has been built, and has a business which I suspect has done better than other businesses during this crisis. But you know, he can share with us as we goes along. So let me start the first round out here by kind of going back and saying, okay, guys, typically in any crisis, the first 90 days are reaction mode. You're just reaction. But as we get to the end of the 90 days, you've got two things happening: a mixture of exhaustion because you've been reacting for 90 days, but also a sense that you can start planning, which must be hard because you're exhausted. Yeah. But let's go backwards for Filipa. Last 90 days, what was it like for you guys?
Well, was exactly what you said.
Okay.
But basically, the first 90 days were the first 2 weeks super tough, super tough, because in 13 years, Wink grew every single month, like for like, and suddenly our stores had to close for you didn't know for how long. So you had 200+ people asking what's going to happen. And I knew we had enough money to hold for like a couple of months to pay salaries and to pay like what we had to pay. But it was very, very, very tough because we were closed for 2.5 months.
Wow.
We didn't have any sales whatsoever. And because we're a service, we could not even sell online. So it was very tough. We didn't sell for 2.5 months. And there was a big shock at the beginning. And then suddenly we decided, okay, enough crying. Let's look what we have ahead. And after like probably 2 months, we started to see that, oh, probably we're going to open in May. Probably we're going to open mid-May. So at least we had kind of a date in our heads to work through that. So that became a bit easier because you could plan a bit. And so we end up spending like probably the last 2 months just working on how we're going to come back, what are we going to do, what the new procedures, what we need to do. So it was contingency plans all the time, procedures, finding suppliers, looking at costs, because then everyone went through, well, Chitra for sure, the masks, the products to clean your hand. It was very, very expensive at the time. Now it's become much more cheaper. But at the time, you were close, you have to invest. So how are we going to do this? So the 90 days were very stressful. And also, I felt a bit like a school teacher, because I also have franchise stores. And what I felt was that my franchisees were completely lost, completely. So I felt like the teacher with all the kids behind me, and I had to bring them over, and I said, okay, just follow me. We'll go through this, but just follow me, do what as I say, just trust me on this, which I didn't know at the time. Will it work? Will it not work?
I mean, did you know what to do, or were you kind of figuring it out as you went along?
I was figuring out what I knew exactly. First thing that I knew is we did to reinvent the way we worked, because probably, Nadim, you don't know, but we use threading, and they put the thread in their mouth. So that would be impossible to work like that. So the first thing on my mind was, we need to find another way to work. And so that was but we would figure out because do we need this? No. Do I need that? Yes. So, okay, forget about this. Now we need suppliers for that. Now they need gloves. No, they don't need gloves after all. You know what I mean? And also because the DGS would keep changing things. So you would have to adapt. We still have to adapt almost every day. So that was a full 90 days.
Just constantly reaction, constantly rebuilding, constantly rechecking, constantly. And then also this concept of you have your people saying, will I have a job? Can you guarantee me? Is it going to work? And your temptation is to say, how the hell am I supposed to know?
Exactly. No, but I felt it was strange, because at the same time, I felt this strength. First 2 weeks were very difficult for me, emotionally, very, very, very difficult. I cried a lot. But then after those 2 weeks, I felt, come on, I have 200+ people. Even Brazil was depending also on me, because Brazil, we have a master's there, but at Spain, it's directly, but in Brazil, it's a master. They didn't know what to do. Also in Brazil, thousands of miles away from here, and it would call me almost every day. What do I do? Have your shops closed yet? If we close, what do we do? What do we do? And I was like, come on, I don't even know the market there so well. You should figure it out a bit of yourself. I don't know what the Brazilian government is going to do in terms of help. So I ended up asking our lawyers there to help me on that. So I would have to juggle people that had their own business, and then all the employees, 200+ employees. And that was a huge thing for me.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I found a way to.
And I think what to me has really struck me is how long it's lasted. So typically you can deal with a crisis for 7 days, for 10 days, for 18 days. We're 90 days into it. And we still don't know, and we're still adjusting. And I think this is where it's going to be really interesting to watch how exhausting it has been for people and how the burnout rates are going to be. So thanks a lot for that, Filipa. I'm going to get back to you on that one, because I think the leadership angle of it, the lessons for the future are going to be really interesting. But let me go to the second most impacted, or even the most impacted between you and Filipa. Chitra, 90 days of opening a new school, dealing with hotels. Will we have flights? Won't we have flights? Who's booking? How do they booking? Help me out here. How was it?
Yeah, I had to we had 3 months. Really, March was stressful, I would say. So I'm going back beyond the 90 days, because actually the stress started in March, and April was depressing. So in March, we really had to get beyond the, oh my God, what am I going to do? Because we were re-projecting scenarios like you could. I mean, we were pulling out new scenarios out of the hat at a speed that you never thought you could, and never thought you would.
Down 100%, down 70%.
Yeah. Whoa, all kinds of reprojections. And it was also the month that personally we had to deal with kids being at home. We have 4 kids, you know, kids going on online schools. So on a personal and business level, there were things being thrown at us that we were just barely catching, you know. And we then had to put a whole, first of all, we had to make the decision not to hire. We have around 300 permanent staff and 300 temporary staff that we take on board every year for the tourism business. And we had to make the first decisions quickly in March not to take on the 300 temporary staff because, you know, this was the first tough business decision we made. They'd been interviewed, some of them had been interviewed, and, you know, because March is the beginning of the season for tourism in Portugal, and you normally start hiring people, extra people, in food and beverage, kitchen, etc. And then we had to start applying for COVID loans, long process, you know, and you know, starting to look at your cash flow. As I said, we had to reproject that 100 times in any case, but, you know, reach out to all your banks, your banking relations, and start applying for the COVID loans and start the temporary layoff process, which was another huge thing I know we were engaged in already back in March. So April, we started putting people on layoff. Out of 260 out of our 300 full-time staff were in layoff. Wow. For 3 months. So that was horrendous just from the emotional perspective as well. You know, closing hotels, you never open a hotel to close it, and putting people on layoff, which is an emotionally difficult thing to do. And I would say April was pretty depressing because, you know, people were in layoff, hotels were closed, and we're still trying to, you know, deal with what was going on worldwide. Every day the news was about COVID. And we, however, had to start looking at re-engineering, readapting, renewing. I mean, if I were to come up with 3 R's, the government was good at the 3 T's, which was testing, tracing, and, you know, transparency. We had to work on re-engineering, readapting, renewing. And there's one thing I learned is that there we were, you know, top level management and executives planning, thinking, oh my God, what are we going to do? But you have to also keep the rest of your team, they don't know what's going on, you know, so we had to have some Zoom calls and, you know, talk about the future, be realistic, but not destroy people's morale. Let's face it. I mean, it's, you know, as I keep saying, it's a sort of 3-year projection we have to look at now, but you can't say that to people because they're thinking, oh my God, you know, so mixture of emotions, some tough messages at the same time, you know, so it was very, very emotional. I binged watch in between hours of Friends with my daughters when they were on Easter holidays, because that's why April was pretty depressing, I can tell you.
Because of
but
Friends
May,
or because of the
sorry, no, Friends was amazing. That was to keep you in a good mood. Everything works out on Friends, right? I mean, well, or they show you. I'm joking. Okay, it's real life. Okay. So, but look, we had to, May and June, I've done more webinars communicating what's going on than ever before. We continued with our marketing. We wrote more newsletters to our guests than ever before. We engaged with our guests, talked to them about what was going on. Oh, this is an Easter recipe. So what I would say is that huge 90 days, 120 days, I can't even really just tell you in 5 minutes, but we've had exciting times and it's exhausting for sure. But we're also lucky to be reopening our hotels now. We started reopening a couple of weeks ago and we're in the process of reopening Cascais. So, you know, it's up and down, but, you know, in the hotel industry, it's all about getting people in service. But we also, in our re-engineering process, because we had to re-engineer every menu, we started doing takeaways in the last 90 days. So again, you know, you had to look at the positives of what came out of it. We learned a lot about takeaway menus and home delivery as well in those 90 days during lockdown, instead of, you know, what do you call it, navel gazing, you know, because you can't give up, and it's wartime, and it's about looking at new strategies and looking forward. And I would say in the school business, we moved online immediately, everything, all interviews, all admissions processes, etc. And guess what? Between the end of March and the end of June, which was April, May, really, we doubled our enrollment numbers, doubled. We got to 80 by the end of June, and we're now past 100. So 20 different nationalities. So there is you know, there is a movement towards Lisbon still. We just, you know, we sold a couple of apartments to Hong Kong. I mean, what can I say? And now the kids are off school after 3 months of 4 months of online school. And here we are as mothers trying to grapple, but it all seems much easier now. I can tell you, I remember thinking back to 2 events which really stressed me out and gave me sleepless nights in January. They're like nothing now, you know. You're like,
yeah, you know, resilience is a painful process, but I think it's interesting because both of you are touching on this concept of, you know, I had to be the hard-headed manager who looks at my cash flow and makes some really tough decisions early on. And then I had to be a leader in the sense that I had to give people a sense of control and predictability in a world where there was none. Yeah, and I think that can induce adrenaline in any person. And it was lovely to hear you laugh, Chitra, because I think you're better laugh than cry because you don't have a choice in between. Even
oh yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
You're not going to be relaxed about, you're in those 2 extremes all the time. I'd be curious in 6 months' time to come back and talk to both of you and see how you're doing physically.
Yeah, we'll be in hopefully not in hospital. I'll tell you that for nothing. But anyway, if we can laugh our way through this this crisis, we'll be better off because laughter is one of the best medicines.
Or maybe the wink Martinhal spa for recovering entrepreneurs. You know, who knows? I'm going to take it to the first as much as I can. All right, so let me jump on to the next guest here. We got José, real estate. You know, 2019, it was going to be the best market in the world. Everybody was optimistic. You could do no wrong in anything you did. Hello. Now they're all saying we don't need offices anymore. We don't need anything anymore. We've got too much real estate. Why are we wasting our time? But you're going to tell me I'm wrong, right?
You're wrong.
Okay, so give me the last 90 days of your life.
Well, it was probably the most stressful of my life because I start way before all of this because I was in Italy in February. Because I manage Milan, Athens, Madrid, and Lisbon. So I was in Italy. So when I came back in February, I already started quarantine. So I'm at home much more time than probably the majority of people. And then it was a huge task because managed the 4 countries at different levels, starting in Italy, as you know, and then Spain, and after Portugal. It was really stressful. In terms of our work itself, that stopped because some of the transactions that were happening, at least in March, stopped because it was impossible to do the deeds. And also the advisory we were doing on some big businesses, they stopped. So at the same challenge, because on February, I was also elected the president of RICS in Portugal. RICS, it's the biggest real estate organization in the world. So during all these last 4 months, I basically work as I would say advisor, psychologist, I don't know, for everybody in real estate in Portugal. So since the construction to the advisors, to the valuers, everybody. And it was an amazing because what I felt globally is a decrease, as Filipa said, as Chitra, is a decrease on the self-knowledge of everybody. So this affected the way we see the world, the way we see our lives, the way we see our businesses. So sometimes I was receiving a call or a webinar giving more advices how to deal with your feelings and about your businesses than speaking about real estate itself. Due to all of this, of course, the real estate scope of the market is changing. I think people will work more from home, but real estate has an amazing importance in our society. As you know, we all need homes, we all need offices, we all need retail units, hotels, etc. to survive. And at the same time, real estate doesn't change in one day. So it's very difficult to change in 2, 3, 4, or 5 years. So it takes some time to all of these put in place in our lives. In terms of my direct businesses, I suffered more or less the same than Filipa Chitra, because I work in a specific part of the business that is distressed assets, that all the investors at this time stopped the investments. The good thing for me is when the market goes very bad, I will have a huge amount of work in 1 or 2 years. So
what a lovely person you are.
it's like the guys that needs to deal with death, with cemeteries, etc. Well,
okay, let's go to another topic now. Thank you. Let's move on.
But then I work in real estate for these last 25 years, and for me, one of the most important thing is to keep the market flowing and keep the interest about Portugal, because aside all the politics that you always have in our country, I think the Portuguese people and the Portuguese entrepreneurs, they are giving a very, very good signal to the market and to the international market. Even with all of these mixed feelings about what is the impact of COVID in our business, and speaking about real estate, I still see a lot of interest to invest in Portugal, and big deals, small deals, homes, etc. So my feeling is that in the end of the day, I'm a positive guy. So in the end of the day, I think in 1 or 2 years, we will be inclusive above the levels of 2018, 2019 in terms of real estate investment.
Right. So even if it's a U recovery, it still will come back strong because in the end, structurally, you think all the conditions are still there. Yeah.
Exactly. I think.
Is that what you've been telling yourself just to be able to function, or is it?
I'd just like to say that we have sold a couple of properties during the last couple of months. So to support José's point, there is a lot of interest still in the Golden Visa and non-habitual residence. Sorry to interrupt, but I just like to.
No. I think it's great to interrupt. I just find entrepreneurs. Yeah, I just find entrepreneurs tend to like to spin the positive side of everything, right? So, but in the end, we're going to find. Yes, which is great.
There's a guy here that rented additional space for their team during this crisis. So there are some crazy guys.
Yeah, and we're going to come to you, Nuno, because I'm curious about your story, because you're going to be sitting there going, no, things are great. But let me go to Ferri first, because I think Ferri kept his business running in the middle of a crisis, and probably had to do with many of the leadership challenges, everybody else is talking about, but at the same time had customers and clients probably demanding the same level of service or different. Ferri, do you want to share your last 90 days with us?
Yes, of course. I think personally wise, it went very, very well. We have an apartment in Lisbon, but for this time, for this period, we decided to move to our country house in beautiful Alentejo. So with a lot of space inside and lots of space outside. So we have, for our kids together, we have a lot of activities to do. We can go outside and picnicking and mountain biking. So on the personal side, it was actually quite good. Also on the personal side, I think in at least my age, not everything there's not so much change. The biggest change is, for example, for my kids who are as teenagers, could not go anymore to, of course, to bars and cafes, but even the festivals have been cancelled. So I feel more pity for that generation than for ourselves. So I'm hoping that for them the possibilities will be more open in the coming weeks, or that at least outside they can together with their friends, and that's what worries me a little bit. On the business side, as I mentioned, I think there's the cost side and there's the staff side. On the cost side, we had some challenges. For example, there was all the imports to Portugal and Spain stopped. So in terms of logistics, we had challenges not to send away the product, but to get the trucks to Portugal, because there was simply no import from Holland or from Germany to Portugal and Spain. So we have been several weeks that we just paid a couple of €1,000 to have empty trucks coming from north of Europe to our place in order to get rid of our product and to be able to send them to the supermarkets. So on the cost side, there it was very difficult, and then again, staff has been difficult. I think there was panic, of course. Why can everybody stay at home, and why does the government say that you should stay safe at home, don't go outside? And no, well, we are working here with 200 people every day, so that's when leadership comes in. I think I've never been so much between the people, work with them, lunch with them in the canteen, just to show them, well, I'm here as well. I'm in the same position. We're all in the same shit, if I may so. And then there was one more thing about staff as well, which is a little bit has to do with some migration. We have a lot of immigrant workers here in the area, and the biggest threat for us in terms of COVID was not so much here locally. It was more people, immigrants, looking for job. We had lots of people coming from Lisbon because hotels, restaurants, stuff. We had lots of people normally working from Lisbon going to our place looking for work, and that's what our main worry was in terms of spreading of the virus, of course. Because some of the immigrants they work together, they live together. So we did actually some mapping about all the stuff. Where are you living? With who are you living? In order to control a little bit your staff and where we would do the potential risks. Because the biggest risk for us was with so many workers is that you got the virus spread on your company and they close your company, for example.
Yeah. And that would have hit a lot harder. So again, this leadership role that you have to come in and give people a sense of there is a plan, there is control, communicate. Did you feel that after a bit this became more of a routine for you, or was it? So did it normalize after a bit?
Yeah, I think the panic was it was about 2 or 3 weeks of panicking. And then, even the numbers, we were, I think, the least in the news. The Alentejo is not hit, or one of the least hit. There are some in in Mura, Evora, and on the east side, in Spain, on the Spanish side. On this side, we are very luckily very clean. So after 2 to 3 weeks, that's stabilized.
How about your clients? Did they change behavior towards you in Holland and other countries? Were they different in this dynamic?
Well, no, they of course they skipped all their visits and their especially the quality control on site. We had to do internal quality checks and send that to them. So we did their work in terms of technical and quality. But actually, they're like the British supermarkets. They had great times because the sales went up, and so that was a good reason for us to have a talk with them if they can share the extra transport cost and whatever cost with us in order to help out some of their suppliers.
So it's interesting. New conversations with clients, new conversations with suppliers, new conversations with employees.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Ferri. Let me go to Nuno, because he's been sitting there going, well, tell me about yours. I know we talked 1.5 years ago, and your business was very much about building infrastructure to deliver. Now everybody moved online. Nuno, I presume your business has, well.
Yes, fortunately, we are used to deal with crises. We started after the 9/11 crisis. And normally when we have a crisis, we have a huge growth. And I'm a little bit embarrassed hearing everyone, because fortunately, we are very good, we are growing, we are recruiting, we are also putting our effort on helping the community. But I can share a little bit more. Well, we are working a lot with huge clients that have big e-commerce platforms or home banking platforms like Continent Online, Fortran Online, BPI home banking for companies and for individuals. So all these platforms need to be very well prepared to address the challenge of growing 6 times during 1 week. Fortunately, and what I will share, it's public. Fortunately, Continent Online did very well, Vorten and BPI also. Other platforms, for example, in terms of e-commerce, were not able to do so. Fortunately, not our clients. And about the challenges we had, they were more on the logistics. So the reason why Continent were not able to fulfill all the products was because they don't have enough people to bring the goods to the houses, not because of the platform. And because of that, we had lots of work during this period. But I would like to go a little bit earlier, because I'm in EO since 3 years and something ago. And when COVID started in China, EO started to analyze that also in China, because we are all over the world. And in January, we started to receive some analysis about what will happen in a country that is hit by COVID-19. And based on that, we decided in February to do some kind of actions to prepare ourselves to the wave that was coming. And we know, because of the information we received, that it will be a big wave with a huge impact in some sectors, with less impact in other sectors. And what we decided in our case was to talk with our clients, with our partners, because, for example, we work with Sanai since 2002. And we talked in a very open way, as we usually do. And we worked on having a long-term perspective on our relations. Fortunately, all our big clients are very committed with us, and they prefer to work with us. So we were able to close our plans for 2020 very early during the year. And we are at the beginning of March, we met our leadership team basically on the 3rd week of March, after having everyone already working from home. And we asked ourselves, well, what will we decide? Because our business plan that is decided in September for the next year was planning a 30% growth. And it's tough to plan a 30% growth in this period. But what we saw is that everything is going very well. We are growing not 30 but 27% year on year nowadays. And we decided not to suspend recruiting, not to suspend our business plan, and we decided to rent more 50% of office space, even though it's now closed. Okay, we are doing a project to reorganize that space, because it's our home, and even though we are on vacations working from home, it's important to have our home for everyone. And if now you are not working at the office, you know that when you go back to the office, you need more space. We allowed already everyone to go to the office if they want, but basically we are not promoting that. We are promoting that you keep working from home. We are planning ahead what we are doing in terms of that, and we are registering every movement from our team since the beginning of March to help the health institutions to address the challenge if we are hit by any case of COVID-19. And in the beginning of March, because we have already prepared, let's say, for this, we put our effort on helping the community, and we started doing contacts through EO International to get alternative sources in terms of APIs to Portugal. We also have had help from Bubu, the last international president from EO International, and we started helping at the beginning some hospitals, and after that, understanding that the most impacted persons are elderly people, and the most impacted institutions are nursing homes. We decided to launch a project that is named Mais Próximo, that basically offers oximeters to nursing homes, and an app that we developed at no cost to monitor all the elderly people at all the nursing homes in the country. And that was also very good to put our energy on helping each other and helping the community, and we had lots of energy from our team that was at home working on their projects, but they also wanted to help on this big initiative that we are yet putting in place. During the morning, we did a webinar with a nursing home that had the first COVID cases in the late April. And nowadays they still have one positive case that is the first person that was positive. Fortunately, the other 40 something are already recovered. So huge challenges in terms of the community, but as we think that companies must be driven by purpose, we think that it's very important nowadays to put our energy on that also.
All right, Nuno, and thank you for that. I mean, clearly a story of we saw it coming, et cetera, et cetera. I've got to say, I think you're the exception, because I was in Madeira teaching a class on the 18th of March, flying back going, and I remember the school called me up saying, we have to reschedule your classes. Let's book everything for May.
Yes, to be honest with you, at the beginning of March, I had already information from Italy that in some nursing homes, the death rate was reaching 40%.
Oh, all right. So,
So
you kind of moved very quick. Can I ask a question about the business though? Did the business go up, or is it on target?
Basically, we are able to reach our 30% growth, and we raised our objective more 5% for this year. My main concern is not the short term. I used to say that what we need to prepare now is the second wave of COVID-19. And what I think is the second wave is the economic impact of COVID-19 in 1 year time, let's say.
All right. Let's put that on hold, because I think we're going to discuss the future here, and there's going to be different levels of optimism again. I want to take a step back, because, you know, we talked a lot about leadership, et cetera, and this management. I mean, you know, if you had to say the biggest lesson you picked up about yourself in this process, and what would it be? And maybe go back to you, Filipa. You know, it's been 90 days of euphoria and hell, many times in the same hour, where you've probably noticed members of your team who've become phenomenal. Others have shown fragility you didn't expect. You know, a lot of stuff's probably happening. What to you has been this lesson? If you had to sit down now and say, okay, I have learned so much in this 90 days, what would it be for you?
Well, first of all, I think I've learned about myself, my capacity of resiliency. I never thought that I could be so resilient. And so I always thought of myself as being a good boss, if I might say. But I never thought of myself, and I don't want to seem cocky about it, but I never thought about being such a good leader to my team at this time. And so I've learned that I could really do it, and especially not just the team, because you're used to take care of your team, but when you have franchisees that they are entrepreneurs themselves and they have their own business. And when you felt that you helped them going through this crisis, I really felt good about myself and my leadership capacity. So I've learned that about me, that I never saw myself exactly like that, if you know what I mean. So that was a big part of it. On the other hand, you do think, I don't want to sound like a cliche, but you do start thinking that I cannot take things for granted, right? And when you plan 3 years ahead or 2 years ahead, not that we cannot do it anymore, but you do think about the little things that you could do different in your business, or be more cost savvy, or even to think about your teams, or do I really need those people in my team now? Or because what you do see is when you're from home, there are people who really do work from home, and there are others who don't.
Yes.
And you end up looking at your business and see what's the priorities. When you're in a crisis, you actually end up like you are more able to see how you need to lose your fat, right? In your business.
So this concept of you don't look at the P&L as much as you look at your balance sheet, right? You're kind of more worried about what are my assets, what are my liabilities.
Exactly. What can we do? What are the which people in the team? And sometimes, and we have very different people, because we have the office people and then we have the store people.
Right.
And there were amazing girls in the stores, and others that looked like they lived in a different world.
Yeah.
They weren't seeing the same as we were. And so I think that for me personally, apart from the personal side of it, at being at home with your kids, with your husband, I think was the resilient part of it, and the leadership.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you kind of said two things that seem to be contradictory, but they're not. That's the paradox. Yeah, on the one hand, you have no visibility of the future, so you're scrambling all the time. But on the other hand, you get this immense clarity about what matters and what doesn't matter.
Exactly.
I think it's really interesting in that sense from a leadership lesson, this concept of, I don't know what's happening, but I know what I need.
Exactly.
I know
That's exactly it.
It's really interesting.
But you end up having a bit more time to think. What I felt also was that when you do, now we're a bit back to where we were, but when you're stuck at home and your stores are closed for almost 3 months, you have time to think about stuff that usually you don't. So when you look at your business like in a quiet way, it's not like, oh, I got a phone call from this store because this happened. That client is there. No, there's no clients, no calls from the stores. And then you do have time to think about the little things and the important things about your business, where you want to grow once all this is over. And so it did give me clarity about that.
There's a kind of a restart element to it. Is there?
Exactly.
That's a nice one. I like that one. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah. Within all this mess, there's kind of a restart button. So let me go to Chitra on this one, because I know, Chitra, you've always been one, whenever I talk to you, with big causal relationships. You kind of go in this, and then there's this, and there's a lot of logic behind it, etc. How the hell do you do this in this situation? I mean, what was your biggest kind of lesson? I kind of picked up a little bit from your conversation earlier. Yeah, you kind of learned that we got to move quick on this. We got to talk to lots of people. But what do you think? I mean, when you look back in 10 years' time and you look back at it, what would you say? What was a lesson that changed you in this crisis?
Really interesting. I mean, I learned a lot, I think, during this time, actually, because one lesson for any business, I think, is you can't communicate enough to stakeholders, to customers. We were busy, our team was busy, but we had to make do with less people, in the sense that we didn't, you'd think it odd, a hotel closed, what are you busy with? Well, guess what? There were a lot of people who were planning to be here as well. And we, you know, the team was really busy handling a lot of negative posts as well. And, you know, there were emails and refunds to be processed. We didn't have, honestly, enough people to you know, do it quickly. You know, we're a 5-star hotel used to quick service, and so we had to, we were grappling a little bit, but we had to prioritize and just move forward. I mean, you know, the economy in other places wasn't moving any quicker, and, you know, there were some really tough emails we had to deal with, but we had to say, you know, very sorry, we're doing the best we can. And so I think communicate more, and, you know, just do it. Don't ignore stuff sometimes, but also ignore, you need to have clarity of vision as well. You know, you need to focus on the right things, and ignore the right things at the same time, in order to ensure your company survives. What more can I say? I learned a lot about, you know, we'd been through the last recession, so I thought, wow, here we were, we'd built resilience, you know. You know, between 2008 and 2013, we learned a lot. And, you know, I would say from a health perspective, I learned a lot about myself and my own health. And here we are again, you know, putting myself through those extreme adrenaline levels and, you know, cortisol, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I had to, given the circumstances of lockdown, I had to learn how to get rid of some of the stress. I'm not saying I'm doing a great job yet, but, you know, you try something every day. I actually started using my bicycle machine that I bought, you know, for the family to use a couple of years back. That good use, like you, and we learned. Sorry?
100 miles to get rid of stress. It's kind of a bit like Filipa. Yeah, suddenly I found this time I didn't know what to do with, and I went back and did stuff that I knew was important, but I never did before. Is that it?
Well, I start with 10K a day. I mean, you know, if I can, 4 times a week, if I can make it. Wow, 100 miles a day. Yeah. You know, no, 4 times a week. So, you know, there are certain limits. I'm not a big runner or a sports person, but I know I have to get rid of my stress and sweat a little bit. You know, it's the best way. If there's one thing you got to do, keep up the cardiovascular and sweat your stress out. That's what I have learned, again. And
take care of yourself. Is that it?
Yeah,
because
take care of yourself.
Yeah,
for sure. And you know, what was interesting, I mean, you know, when you say what do you learn, you can't just isolate. It's not just about yourself or your business. Obviously, being the incoming president of EO in the toughest time that I've ever seen in my life was a little bit daunting. But, you know, with communication, you know, we got through it. We, you know, we had a high number of renewals. First of all, we had a lot of growth last year, from 20 members to 30 members. And I was in the membership chair last year, so I learned a lot in my role and worked with Nuno, who was on the board last year as well. And we've got, you know, incoming marketing and membership co-chair Filipa. Ferri came on board as a member, and we grew from 20 members to 30 members, and that was, you know, 50% growth. Now we're really looking, instead of saying, oh, you know, it's the end of it, we're looking towards the future and still trying to project that we want 50 members, because 50 members is important to have for a chapter of Entrepreneurs Organization for many things. And so, you know, we had to really turn around, pivot. You know, I know entrepreneurs love to talk about pivoting, or professors do. It's very difficult to.
This is the pivot of the century, I think. It's not just an average little pivot, isn't it?
Absolutely. We're pivoting on several fronts, right? And so what can I say? And I learned a lot about, having the kids at home. We were Corona. Oh yeah, that was the other thing. Why did I have to get on a bike? Not just because of the stress. We were Corona baking like you wouldn't believe it. I mean,
yeah, bread became like a big deal. I suddenly realized everybody was making bread. I was like, Jesus. I even told my wife, we need to make bread. And she asked me why. I said, everybody else is making bread. It seems to be the Corona thing to do, right?
Yeah, but I tell you, I learned how to make, my husband is from Switzerland, Roman is from Switzerland, from Zurich, and his paternal grandmother is German.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned how to make German cheesecake during this lockdown. And I even tested Oma Stern's cheesecake. And I learned at the same time, because once you start getting into one thing, you got to learn about other stuff, how to make American cheesecake, the two varieties, the ricotta one as well.
Hey, I'm open to test it out because I'm a big fan. I didn't know there was a German cheesecake, but that's okay. I'm good with that.
Oh, that's the origin, because they use this, what the Americans do is they started using Philadelphia cream cheese, but the original is actually this curd cheese that the Germans use, which is quark. I mean,
there's quark. Okay. All right. Well, there you go. So lessons is be resilient, take care of yourself. This concept of clarity, I see keep coming up. Yeah, clarity, clarity.
Well, and it's actually, we introduced that cheesecake, sorry to interrupt, on our home delivery menu now.
And there you go.
Order out, Nadim.
I will indeed. I'm going to try that. So you extended your whole thing into a product. Okay, that's very frightening. That is really frightening, though. But I mean,
it's how we should all be. Add things, pivot. Remember, so
that's not a pivot. That's like a yeah. It's a serious pivot. Pivot is just like a thing there.
But we're all very thankful for companies that are still keeping the economy going, like Nuno's. So don't for a minute say, Nuno, that you feel bad. Be thankful. We're all thankful for your kind of company that are.
I feel embarrassed, but not bad. I'm doing my best to help. In terms of economics and in terms of health, so I do my best.
No,
yeah,
so
it's interesting. So I'm going to just pull something out here because Ferri talked about this earlier, and maybe I can go to you, Ferri. This concept of a lot of the relationships that were crystallized before the crisis now seem to be open to new dialogues. Yeah, so the relationship between us and our employees, between us and our clients, everything's kind of open again. Do you feel that, Ferri? Because it's kind of the crisis kind of broke up a lot of old rules and is opening new rules, or not?
Well, I don't know if I understand exactly your question, but I'm in the process of, since December or November, I'm in the process of selling the business, of selling part of the business.
Mm-hmm.
So once you start thinking about that, you start about thinking, new directors, or who's going to do your job, or so we started with a new board of director, or a new team.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing then, in the middle of this learning curve for them, they are confronted with this with the COVID-19. So it was a big hit for them, but also very interesting to see how they dealt with it, and that actually, looking back, Chitra was mentioning the stress of being an entrepreneur. Looking back, I thought, why didn't I do that 5 years ago, or just more delegate more, trust your people more. They are once you give them the responsibility, they will take it. So that's I think it's a big learning curve for me as well.
I think many people found a depth of talent in their people they didn't know existed or didn't want to see before, or something like that, but on the other hand, I think we also saw in other people which we thought had more in them, they didn't. And so I think it's been a reshift here, which is really interesting. But I think
I'd just like to say that, I mean, you've mentioned that twice now, Nadim, and sorry to interrupt, but, you know, we definitely saw that. I mean, I would say I'm really proud of my team. Most of them rose to this new challenge, and you saw people, you know, pulling out courage from deep within them to face this new world, and, you know, coming up with temporary solutions for, you know, online delivery. I mean, we had to, it looks like I need to engage Nuno's company to, you know, redo the whole delivery service. But, you know, it was hard learning facts, but we couldn't do much during lockdown. But there is always that small percentage, half of which will come back. You know, they have to go through a reboot. But there is one small part that just can't deal with the risk of, you know, it's once in 100 years what we're going through. And you don't blame them a little bit because, you know, we're all only human. But, you know, we keep trying to encourage, you know, everyone to come on board. And that has a lot to do with leadership. But there are some people who are very fragile, as you mentioned earlier. I just wanted to say.
Yeah, but and I think that was my point when I talked to Ferri, is this kind of changes, does this change relationships? Because, you know,
it does.
You know, they always say, you know, men who used to go to the war in Vietnam would be friends for life, because once you've suffered together, you bond, right? And so I think this concept, what Ferri was saying, many entrepreneurs say to me, I wish I'd delegated more. I wish. And I keep saying, yeah, but there was something missing for you, clearly. And typically a good crisis is good for that, because it allows you to see things that you probably wouldn't see before because you were too busy. I'll delegate next month when I have time. They're not ready. I'm not ready, et cetera, et cetera. But let me take that further. Zay, you said you're now, you know, representing other people as well in an association, et cetera, et cetera. And you said you spend most time telling people it's going to be okay. Do you believe this, or is that part of the job description now?
Nadim, I was born and I grew up in a home of two big entrepreneurs and two big leaders, my parents. One from the touristic hospitality business, and the other one, my father, from the fishing business.
Okay, that's a tough one.
We had fishing boats, as you can imagine. You cannot control weather, we cannot control what's happening on the sea. So I was born dealing with these unpredictable things. So the COVID at this stage, it was not a new thing, at least from my mindset, because I was born inside all of these. I think the big challenge from all of these, and sharing a little bit what I discussed with my colleagues, because a lot of them look at me as a role models for them, not just for the way I usually deal with businesses, but also I deal with real estate. I didn't change a lot the way I manage my team or the way I manage my business, because I delegate a lot even before COVID. So I have a different kind of a way of thinking about this. But the majority of my colleagues in real estate, they don't think like this. So when they don't have any floor, and when they stop doing businesses, they are rethinking a lot what they will do in the future and the way they are managing their teams. As Filipa and Chitra said, on this crisis, on everything that we lived, we are exactly seeing what we can count on in terms of our team, in terms of our families, our business itself. I had a big change in my personal life during all this process, because I live in between two countries. So my home is in Madrid. It's not in Lisbon. So I was in my holidays house in Portugal when all of this happened, and I was not able to go to Madrid. At the same time, I was almost in the final stage of an adoption process to Brazil, so everything stopped. And in the end of the day, I needed to deal with these feelings, and at the same time being positive for the market and for my team, and give them a way of thinking about the future. I don't have a crystal ball, so I'm not able to help to see if the prices will increase, decrease, and how the business can be done in the future. But the message I'm passing to my colleagues, to my team, is that we need to be positive about the future. If you're already negative, the things will not happen. So if you are positive, if you are learning about what you are dealing with, the future can be bright and can be better than you are living today. So, of course, this is a challenge, and it's a challenge for all of us. And my personal biggest challenge was to deal with this, to be in front of a client, to be in front of a colleague, to be in front of my team. And I was struggling inside to be strong, and because I was not in my home, I was not in my process of adoption. That was one of my dreams, etc., etc. I needed to go to 70% of my team and saying you need to be on layoff also, and that was one. I think it was the worst day of all of this process. It was the day I spoke with my team, not because of the process itself, but because of the reply I received from the team. Because it was an amazing reply. The majority of my team members said, I understand that you need to do this to basically think about the future of the company, to think about the future of our business, of our jobs. And when you have a team that, of course, you also have people in your team that are not in the same boat, that after all of this, you need to do something. But when the majority of your team sees like you and sees that you need to take actions basically to go forward with your business, to go forward with your ideas, and to reinvent what you're doing is the best. That's why I always say that was the biggest, most important day of all of these 6 months was that day. Then when the work starting again, everything starting again, it's very good, but that was the specific point that make all the sense for me. And when I do classes and I speak with a lot of students on real estate, when I speak with my colleagues, I always say this, it's important, it's really, really important to be positive, to believe that we have an amazing country. Even living in Madrid, when I went to Madrid, I think I've even been more Portuguese. I understand the immigrant rationale. Yeah. If I loved my country, I 200% love now my country, because it's really an amazing country with amazing people, with amazing entrepreneurs. During all this process, I was in contact with my colleagues of EO on real estate in the world. A lot of them are interested in buying in Portugal, even hotels, Chitra. So I don't know, probably new businesses there. But one of the things is that we really are an amazing country, and we have amazing people. Of course, in all businesses, as Filipa said, you always have people that are not in the same boat. They live in a different world, but it's not a matter of Portugal. I think they live on the moon, in Mars. They don't live in the planet. I think I'm a better person, and I'm trying to pass this to my colleagues in real estate, because they basically deal with a very, very important part of our world, as I said, that is real estate. If you use, if you invest, or if you need to buy. So it's really important.
But where do you think you get, I mean, okay, there's a boundary, right? You can be a positive person or you can be delusional.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you find that balance? You know,
well,
look in the mirror and go, what am I saying here?
Yeah, well, you need to see exactly where you have your boundaries there. Of course, when I'm doing specific works on real estate, I had a huge amount of work, because all of my clients want to know what will be the future. So I'm working on business models, numbers, and predictions, etc. And you need to be prepared. So when I say I'm positive, because I think it's a feeling you need to have, but you need to be realistic in the end of the day, because I lived previous real estate crisis, and I know that the prices will decrease, that the unemployment will increase, that you have hotels closing, retail units, shopping centers.
That's the point, right? So going back to Nuno as well, Chitra as well. So basically, once you start getting a sense of predictability into the machine, that you can see the future, you relax into it, right? I think what this crisis was we didn't know. We were all looking at exponential curves every day going, I don't actually know what that means. I don't know where it's going, et cetera, et cetera.
But Nadim, some things, I mean, you know, brands are still important, especially if they mean something, you know, and I'd just like to touch upon that because we are on a micro level. I mean, José is looking at the macro situation for Portugal, and, you know, you're a chartered surveyor, José. You belong to the MRICS, you know, respected, Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, do you not, if I'm not mistaken, for valuations? But, you know, from the point of view, I mean, certain things don't change. Brand is still important. Location in real estate is still important. Quality, you know, without quality, you don't have brand. And I would say it comes back to some basics again. I mean, whether we're in, you know, once in 100-year situation, which we are, but we're also having been through the last recession. I would say, you know, all the things that lead up to building a solid brand still say the same. Your team has got to be great, invest in your team, treat your customers well. And we've got, as I was saying earlier, we actually made 2 sales to Hong Kong Chinese clients of the Martinhal residences apartments for the Golden Visa. I've actually done, you know, a webinar about the post-COVID world and why Portugal will still, will be even more attractive, you know, just after this lockdown.
The fundamentals are there, and I think that was my point, and that's why I was picking up on José, is this concept of once you go into once you come out of that turbulence, if you can start getting some more visibility and predictability into, you go back into your natural space, right? Because that's what it's about. And I know, Nuno, you wanted to say something there?
Well, I was talking about, I think about what José was sharing, and I think it's different to be optimistic and to be a positive guy. Mm-hmm. I like to be a positive guy because you also have risks and opportunities, and when you focus on doing something to get something from the opportunities, you normally need to be optimistic, because if you are a negative guy, you only saw the risks and you do not act.
I'm not talking about being negative.
But yes, the other thing is, for me, it's very important, is that I think we have learned that we do not control our life. And when you tell that to your team, they normally say, well, that's you talking in theory and so on and so on. And now we are in practice. We do not control what's happening. And when you say to your team, well, you need to be prepared to monitor things, not to control things, because you do not control even your life. Something can happen to you that you do not control. You can act on what's happening, but you do not control you do not control what's happening. And nowadays we are living that because
now I'm getting scared. Now I'm getting more scared, not less scared here. I like to have a sense of control.
But you don't have control. Imagine that we will have a second wave, for example. You don't know.
Let me pull this back a little bit, because I think we're touching on the same thing here. You know, I'm listening to José speaking, and José's saying 2 things to me. He's saying, and Chitra's pitching in as well, and I'm sure Ferri will agree as well, Filipa as well. There are certain things that we know will stay facts. You know, people will still need vegetables, whether you like it or not. They're going to need them, and whoever can deliver them with quality and on time is going to make money. End of story.
I do not agree with you. Sorry, Nadim.
You think people won't need vegetables?
No, not that. Imagine, for example, what happened in China with salmon. Imagine that you were selling salmon and you have granted that Chinese people will brought a lot of salmon. From one day to the other, you stop selling everything. So we need to be prepared to the uncertainty.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but you know, when José says things like, well, we know that Portugal is still an extremely attractive country to live in. We know that Portugal, oh, I like that. When we're being nationalist.
But we were even more attractive before the problem we are having now in Lisbon.
No, I'm not
another unexpected happening.
Yes, not disagreeing with you, but what I'm trying to pick up here from you guys and trying to give it some sort of conceptual framework is this concept of I'm doing two things. Yeah, what I'm hearing from you guys is two things. On the one hand, I'm doing things which is reverting back to the basics of my business and trying to understand what that is. Yeah, so Chitra goes back and says, if you treat customers well, if you keep doing that, if you don't let the crisis take over the basics of your business, you have an asset base that's very going to be strong. Does that make sense? And José is kind of saying the same thing. Then
and pivot as well, little bits. I'm sorry, we have to relook at some of our zero revenue.
But that pivot is interesting just because it's entrepreneurial, but to a great extent, what you're saying is, you know, the basics: treat your customers well, build a strong brand, answer the damn emails on time, recognize the great people on your team, and keep pushing them to grow. And those are basics. And those are basics you would have told me before the crisis, after the crisis, and during the crisis. Yeah. And what you're all saying to me is get back to those basics. And that's difficult to do in the middle of a crisis because you're reacting and you might forget the basics. But then there's a second thing which is really interesting, which is appearing, is this confidence that if I can build the right team and take the right attitude, I can deal with any future that comes along. There's this sense that I'm feeling among you guys that is, if you take care of yourself and your people. So, you know, I like to say that in times of uncertainty, the job of a leader is not to predict the future, it's to build the team that can deal with any future. Yeah. And that's kind of what I'm hearing from you guys. Yeah. So this is kind of, go ahead.
As much as you can, as much as you can, Nadim.
Yes,
I mean, I'd just like to say, you know, that, you know, obviously, for example, I'll be very honest, you've got Martinhal in the middle of Lisbon town. And the pivot I'm talking about is becoming service departments there and moving some of my team to the education hub, which has, you know, a different future, short-term future at least, to hotels in central Lisbon. So, and thankfully as well, you know, we had focused on villas with private pools and private gardens because that's what's in demand, and pushing that more for our Algarve products. So we're having to really re-engineer our 4 hotels in different ways. And thankfully, we had diversified into the education business because, you know, people trained in hospitality are worth a lot, and good team members are worth a lot, you know, and you can, you know, give them similar, you know, different role, but with sort of operational responsibilities in your new businesses. But, you know, keeping the team on is key if you can do it. I mean, I can see lots of businesses, especially with limited liquidity that, you know, the typical Portuguese business has. Wow, it's hard.
Okay. You're going to have to make the tough decisions. You all talked about that last 60, 90 days. Tough decisions had to be made, et cetera, et cetera. Ferri, on the other hand, was able to some extent, talk to his customers and say, you know, we need to rediscuss costing here because if you want me to supply you when my costs are going through the ceiling, we need to talk about that. So as long as that clarity is there, and so for me, this lesson from the past is get back to your basics, keep your clarity going, and just keep executing. Communicate like crazy is what you've all been telling me. Talk, because everybody around us is looking to us, looking for some sort of vision, whether we like it or not. Yeah. What's happening, boss? Tell me, will I have my job next week, next month, etc. On the other hand, you make the tough choices. You say, have to go to his team and say, okay, we're going into layoff. It's a tough choice because he couldn't pivot them somewhere else at that stage. But then comes this optimism. And this is why I'm trying to figure out where it's coming from, because
I think
within.
Yeah. What, it's a 10-kilometer on the bicycle. I get it, but there must be something. Where's it coming from, guys?
Nadim, in my case, I think it's important to have the courage to deal with fear, and also to have the humility to be bold in this tough period.
Get that? Well, you know, you don't pick that off a shelf. You've just come out of 90 days of pure reaction. Okay, I'm you know, I started with Filipa today, and she said, "I'm exhausted." Oh, maybe you're not, but I'm sorry.
I'm not sorry. I'm with a lot of energy.
Yeah, I know. You're not the norm.
But I'm not the norm. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You know, it's difficult to say, okay, do what Nuno does, because you're not the norm.
No, of course.
Also, you know, I think in my perspective, also where the optimism can come to is that you believe in your brand and you believe in your business, and you think that I believe in this. I know we can go through this, especially, of course, if you have a bit of money to go through this crisis, or if you have to go
but is it
COVID lines. But I think you believe in what you have built, and you have your loyal customers, and they will come back.
But is it because you built it? Is it because you built it?
Probably.
But may I just say, you called me quite rational early on, and I'd like to just comment on that, because you need to be very rational too. I mean, you know, I'm an emotional person. I'm Indian. I can't help it, and I believe in destiny, you know, totally. But I also have my rational side.
I'm going to go to Ferri on the destiny bit afterwards, because the Dutch that as well.
You know, especially because I'm married to a Swiss. You know, I'm Singaporean originally, very rational. But the facts for us, I mean, as I've said, you know, this thing about Portugal, you know, will be popular is based on some facts too. I mean, it's supply and demand too, Nadim, it's economics. The supply of good quality buildings, you know, in good locations are limited, which is why we're seeing sales for our residential. And again, school, we did the huge due diligence of, you know, starting up an international school in that part of Lisbon that we did. And that's why we're seeing an increase in demand as well. You know, there's some basics, you're absolutely right, they don't change if you've done your due diligence well and if you believe in the product you're building. So I just like to say it's not all optimism. I've been here in Portugal nearly 20 years now. And, you know, I've done a whole TEDx talk on why Portugal, that was 3 years ago. And then I updated it on, you know, with this webinar on why Portugal will still make it through COVID. And I give you all the reasons there, and they're all rational. You know, we've got an open, tolerant, liberal society here that is attractive. People have been in lockdown thinking about, what am I doing? Oh my God. And what comes out as a reflection, lifestyle is important. My family is important. So people are moving here based on those facts as well. So there are a lot of facts that you know, will push us into a positive era, whether it's a V-shaped recovery or U-shaped recovery.
Right.
There are some great things. And because we'd been through the previous recession, there are, you know, a lot of things got cleaned up, let's face it. Okay. You know, in Europe as a whole, but in Portugal too. So, you know, I'm not positive just because it's sort of, I believe in my product or it's a font deep within. I'm also being very rational about it. And, you know, this I can say as a foreigner sitting here for sure. I mean, you know, Ferri is also one of the foreigners. So you are too, Nadim. And I think we're all, the three of us are here for some very good basics in Portugal. And it's not, you know, there are other great strategic things that are good about it. It's location. We're on the continent, not an island somewhere. You know, people can still get to us through driving. Thankfully, we can still do the transport. You know, you know, people can.
I don't disagree with it. To me, what's fascinating, and you guys know I've been interested in entrepreneurship, entrepreneurs as a DNA type profile in the past. You know, because I tell all my students at Nova, don't be an entrepreneur. You'd be an idiot to be an entrepreneur. It's going to kill you. The probability of success is low, and you can get a job earning a lot more money than this. Please, you can buy a ping pong table and bean bags for your home. And that's what I keep telling them. And I'm doing this because it's a rational decision. And then you guys prove me wrong time and time again. So it's a fascinating. So I'm trying to build this profile that says, you know, how do you get these people? And I'd be interested to later on go back and look at if entrepreneurial organizations responded better to the crisis than other structures. Yeah. Typically,
so because Italy, which was the worst hit country ever, had 100% renewals or something. I mean, some big renewal number. Someone correct me, but I heard like pretty much all their entrepreneurs renewed. Yeah, to stay in the association. And isn't that amazing? I mean, they were harder hit than we were in you know, several ways. Harder. Yeah. So I think survival is part of our DNA.
Filipa, are you an optimist? Are you optimistic about the future? Oh, the hesitation, though. I like that. Okay,
so hesitation. Well, I'm optimistic because I think this will end.
Okay,
this has to end.
Point. So to me is, okay, the crisis will come. Nuno says there'll be a second wave. There might be another virus, et cetera, et cetera. I think this concept of that we need more agile organizations that can adjust quicker is something we will all accept on. Yeah. So the question is your confidence in the market or is your confidence in your organization's ability to adjust? That is
I know we're going to suffer, but I have confidence enough in our organization. I think now I can pick up exactly the people I wanted on my side to help me through this. And I believe we can do it. It's going to be tough. Everyone knows. Mm-hmm. But I think once the fear and the virus is over, we grew 2 digits through the other crisis every single year. So because of the kind of business we have too, I believe we have the good people now to go through this.
All right, I've heard the optimism of José. Nuno's just optimism on a plate. So let me go to Ferri. Are you optimistic?
I'm a very optimistic person for myself.
Even the Dutch.
No, and it even I think it's typically for an entrepreneur that even the decision is not really completely rational. Maybe some irrationality also helps just by having the guts and taking the risk and go for it and spend 24/7 on your business. So that's what makes it different than a normal job, of course. Having said that, I lost my brother, for example, last year, and those are situations, the heavy situations. The death of my brother, this crisis, of course, make you think in a different way. About you're going to start looking different to your business. What am I doing? You talk to your clients on a different level, in a different way, because you've been through the crisis together. So I think especially direct relationships and brands, of course, but the relationship with the customer will be very important. Is very important for the post COVID-19.
Yeah. And I think it's really fascinating because all of you are talking about this ability to, on the one hand, be distant enough from the business to actually see it, but close enough to your people to guide them through it. And I'm finding all these paradoxes here because, as Ferri was saying, you have an emotional hard time personally. It allows you to put your business into perspective, right? Because, and Zé as well, with adoption, you kind of step back a bit and go, hold on, what's really important here? And this ability to step back from your business is what gives you the clarity, right? Because you're not being swept by the emotions of small crises in the business. You're actually focusing on what the core is. And I think this is really a healthy lesson to people of how entrepreneurs tend to take things. And, last year I invited 5 entrepreneurs to come speak to my MBA students. And I asked them all to write an essay at the end called "What Makes Entrepreneurs Entrepreneurial?" I said, pick up what these people are saying and give me your perspective. And all of them said, I mean, Nuno, you were one of them, and everyone was very personal. They told the whole story of their business from beginning to the end, and it was quite interesting to see how it happens. And hopefully, Mrs. Incoming President, we can repeat this agreement this year. So I'll be bugging you guys about this. It was really interesting because they all said that all of them seem to continuously visualize their business moving forward. They're constantly, even when they're looking back, they're what they're calling sense making of their business and their role in their business and their business moving forward. And this ability to keep looking in the mirror and process and therefore make sense of things around you. And when you've made sense of things, you move forward. I think what astounds me most about entrepreneurs, and I think I'm hearing a lot in this, the way you guys talk about it. And I think sometimes it's misinterpreted. Sometimes people say entrepreneurs are crazy fools who are always optimistic. Yeah. Which we hear a lot, et cetera. They're visionaries. And I keep saying, I don't think they're visionaries. I think they're people who are constantly looking to build more clarity. And because of that, they're constantly engaging, constantly talking with customers, with their employees all the time. And they just seem to have an interesting instinct for being in the right place and doing the right thing at the right time. Yeah, and I think this is why, for me, it's been so interesting to engage with EO and stuff like that. All right, we got 5 minutes before we go to Q&As across the board, yeah? So let's go a quick last lightning round between all of you. Yeah, so one piece of advice for somebody who's going through this. So who wants to start? Why don't we go to Zé first? Because I kind of cut you off and we went into a free chat.
No worries. As I said, I think the best message I can pass aside the positive message that I already said that I really believe on is believe in yourself. I think it's one of the things that is lacking a lot nowadays because all the confinement, being at home, really thinking about business at all the levels, the entrepreneurs, all the levels in the companies. So you need to start again, believing in yourself that you can do it and that together we can go again and be even more stronger in the future. I always say this, it was an amazing pleasure to be on EO Portugal since the beginning of this year. In the probably one of the worst moments to be involved in an organization like this.
A great timing there.
A great time, and it was an amazing privilege to be involved on this, because I really believe, and I think when you think about Portugal and see this positive thing, is because you have these amazing entrepreneurs, and I'm not talking about myself, but all the ones that are in this webinar and the other members of EO, and the way we think about the future, I think it's important.
All right, thank you very much, Zé. Filipa, why don't we go to you now?
I have to say, like José, believe in yourself and choose your people carefully. The people that surround you and work with you, it's super important. And sometimes choose people that are better than you. Don't be afraid of that. So that's one of my...
Yeah. So that's a skill you need to develop, though, is learning to find people who are good. Yeah, because we tend to like to choose people who are like us many times, instead of people who complement us. Thank you very much
exactly.
for that. No.
Well, getting from Filipa, I would have believe in your people, but your team and your clients, because we are all human beings, and we are all together in these challenges. And sometimes we think in only one part, only to serve clients or only to serve our teams. It's important to deal with uncertainty and to know that we cannot control our life, even though we would like a lot to do that. And align better with your principles, manage by principles. And I would make an advertisement. Read the book, The Infinite Game from Simon Sinek, because if you are working on an infinite game approach, this is only 1 or 2 or 3 years time in your life. And we normally entrepreneurs are here in the long term. We are not here to go away in 1 year or 2. So believe that if you were able to do everything till now, you will be able also to do that in future. And your team is with you if you are with them.
All right, thank you for that. Ferri, how about you? One piece of advice.
Nadim, I couldn't agree with you more. As you said, what you said, that entrepreneurs are not always the visionaries and they know it all and they all foresee it. Well, at least in my case, it's you are an entrepreneur as a result of constant thinking and mixing, rethinking and trying. And I used to I used to work 18 hours per day and use the other 6 hours most at night for thinking.
Wow.
And now I permit myself to sometimes to do the 6 hours of thinking, also staring out of the window.
Wow.
Looking to the beautiful Alentejo, and discovered that actually time is your best friend.
Fascinating.
So
I like that. I like that. Yeah, because in the end, that's why you set up a business, guys, because it was in here, right? So don't throw this baby away.
And it's not stopping you. It's on the contrary. It's moving you forward, because time and ideas are the best ingredient for to continue with your business.
That's one thing my students said. Entrepreneurs are restless. Just constantly restless people. Yeah, there's no sense of, oh, we've relaxed now, etc., etc. Okay, thank you very much. And Chitra, why don't we close up with you with your piece of advice here?
Oh God, why do you give me just one piece that I should give? But anyway, I'll try to.
Okay, give me 27, but nobody's going to be listening after the first. So give me.
No, so definitely agree that build a complementary team. I mean, I was lucky enough that I married someone. We started a business together. We have totally complementary skills, and guess what? This is what actually keeps us alive. Also, because we bounce ideas off each other all the time in a restless way. which is pretty tough, but you know, that also makes you then walk the dog, and you take that time over coffee every morning to make sure that you are seeing the other side of what you're thinking. You know, you gotta keep talking about it to other people, and that's why the EO forum is great, because you can talk to someone who doesn't think necessarily the same way about things as you do, and that actually builds stronger ideas by the end of it. And just one more piece of advice: look after the cash. I know nobody has talked about it, but that's the rational me going. Look after the cash, because if you run out of cash, you don't have a business.
Look after the cash. Yes, I'll tell my wife that. Look after the cash. I'll tell my kids that, who seem to think they need new laptops just because now their school's online. And Dad, you know, the old computer doesn't work for me. Look after the cash. I'm going to put that on.
Yeah, treasurer, look after the cash. Yeah.
If I could use one word and this is my colleague Miguel Pina, who teaches leadership at the school.
I know him, yeah.
He coined a term, which is, I love it. He called it ambition. You know, he says an entrepreneur is a mixture between humble and ambition, and it's that ambition, it's that ambition that isn't out of control. It's a humility that's actually quite respectful, and I think this is the balance everybody's trying to find. And I think the crisis brought a serious dose of ambition into everybody's life, which I think will end up being a positive, but I don't think anybody would have asked for it. How's that? And I think this is really going to be the thing moving forward. All right, guys, we've gone through our time. It's 4:33. I would like to leave a few minutes open for some Q&A. So guys who are on the call, please feel free to type in your questions to any of our panelists, if it's one or all, et cetera, et cetera. Lena, do you want to say something there?
I was just about to say that we have a very quiet crowd. That they've been sticking to us, which is really good, but we don't have any questions so far.
But we're also on live stream, right, on Facebook.
Yeah, on Facebook.
People are wanting to ask on Facebook, please do ask.
So feel free to ask any questions. You're supposed to be quiet because its questions are being typed.
Sorry, I'm just hearing myself to see whether there are any questions coming.
Okay, I've got a question here.
Yeah.
All right. Almost 50%,
a huge one.
Almost 50% of the participants in this webinar are foreigners, even the moderator. Married to a Portuguese with 3 kids. I made 3 Portuguese people, okay? I have contributed to the population.
And you're from Benfica, which is very important.
What do you see in Portugal, the typical Portuguese myths? And that's actually a very good question. What would be the one thing you could say to us so we can become a bit more like you about our own country, mainly in this changing world we're facing? I like that. I mean, that's a very good point. Even José lives in Madrid. Yeah, which is all very nice. You love Portugal, but you live in Madrid. Come on. So let's go to the foreigners. Ferri, what is it about this country that's great? Or maybe you'll say, it's not that great. I just didn't have anywhere else to start my business. I'm asking a straight question here.
I'm a foreigner, but I think this year or next year I spent more time in Portugal than in Holland. So within a few moments I feel myself more Portuguese than Dutch. Now Portugal, I had this webinar with EO. When was it? A couple of months ago when I entered the EO organization, and one of the questions was, what is the best decision you made in your life? And of course, besides the standard answer, having the kids, my answer was moving to Portugal. It's actually, and after 25 years I'm still totally agree with that. It's a mixture of climate, it's full of opportunities, it's the acceptance that the Portuguese government or bureaucracy is not always helping, but on the other hand, the distance from your company to Portuguese government, because of the small country, is also very short. So very short lines with ministers or with secretaries of state. And then of course the food and the drinks, especially the food, the passion of teenagers talking about food in bars and in clubs is great, and I'm very lucky to be here.
I'm getting hungry now, man. And I've got to teach a class from 5:30 to 7:30, so thank you for that one. All right, Chitra, how about you?
again, as I've said, I've done like webinars and talks on this, so you can find the full list online on TED. Search Chitra Stern and TED, you'll find a whole list. But the one thing I'd like to say is that the Portuguese, and I've lived here for 19 years now, so same length of time. I'm originally from Singapore, born to Indian parents. So, I moved to London when I was 19, so and lived in London for 12 years, married to a Swiss. And I must say, Portugal is, if not one of the most open, tolerant, liberal societies I've ever been in. And I know the Portuguese complain a lot about their own country. It's normal because you always want to be better, which is amazing. And whenever I say, I've never faced racism here, they say, but Chitra, we still have to, improve ourselves. And, 2 weeks ago in Espresso, there was a big article about all the racially violent incidents, and there were 5 since 1975 or something. During this Black Lives Matter thing. And I think this is one of the huge points of why I love living in Portugal, is the open, tolerant, liberal society, welcoming society for all colors, races, religions, and people are genuinely interested in your culture, not just paying it lip service. And I would say this is one of the most undersold things about Portugal, and it might be that intrinsic reason, which is not talked about much, but is actually the reason why we all feel comfortable here as foreigners. It's amazing. So well done, Portugal. And I have had 4 kids born here. We're all residents here, and what was originally a 5-year plan is now, you can't get rid of us. So thank you, Portugal. All
right, cool. Yeah, I gotta admit, I'm gonna answer this one. I'm a panelist. No, I'm not a panelist. I'm the moderator. But I'm going to answer this because I'm a foreigner. It's kind of hitting with where Ferri hits. It's big enough to have opportunity and interest, but it's small enough that you can feel that you can actually get traction. And I think sometimes in bigger economies, you get that. On the other hand, I find it one of the most liberal democracies in Europe, in the sense that a lot of spectrum for ideas and debate and discussion, which I think is brutally healthy. I find the curious thing is the Portuguese don't like it as much as we do, which I find really interesting. When I first went to Portugal,
it's a continuous improvement philosophy, Nadim.
Yeah, my wife kept saying, "Let's leave the country." I'm like, "You're out of your mind. It's so damn good here. Why would you want to leave? Why do you want to go to live in London? It's hard." Nothing against the English. Sorry, I didn't mean it that way.
Sorry. Yeah.
So, but I do think that what you tend to find is it's good when you've reached that stage of your life where you have kids, you need to get work done, et cetera, et cetera. I think when I was younger, when I was 18, 19, I loved London because it's alive. It's
great city. Yeah.
And I do realize that when I fly to New York or London, I walk faster, my adrenaline's up, et cetera, and I miss that. So to add it all though, in the end, my biggest fear for my kids is it's too comfortable. And that's something I'm
to you, Nadim. Don't worry about that. They've seen you work hard, and even more now that you've been working at home.
No, but we all spoil our kids. Come on. And I got to get them out here to suffer a little bit. So I'm working on something. But anyway, so that's me. All right, let me go to the next question here from Nuno here. He says, the right thing in the right time means that in a crisis, the crisis can be a good thing to move away and wait for the right time. Is that what we're seeing here? Is it a time to wait for new opportunities, or drill on?
Nadim, in my case, I think it will depend on what you are. If you are an entrepreneur, you will not go away in tough times. Mm-hmm. If you are an investor, eventually you will rationalize and decide to go away and come back later. But if you are a real entrepreneur, tough times are for you, and you want to win on tough times.
All right. Filipa, what about you? I'm going to go to the Portuguese on this one.
I agree with what Nuno was saying. I think it depends on where you are, and also depends on what kind of business you have. I had a small business apart from Wink that I decided to close and wait for it. Well, it's a project that it's on standby right now because I didn't want to put more money on it right now. I had Wink to take care of it, so I've decided it's a project that it's done. I did spend quite a lot of money on it, but it's on standby. So it depends. If I was an investor, yes, probably I would see things differently. and I would see where I could get a good opportunity.
Okay.
Probably in real estate or not.
Well, I don't know about real estate. Every time I dabble in real estate, I lose money. So I've just given up.
Invest with us, Nadim.
But you know that,
Invest with us.
yeah, you know that some of my investor clients, they are eager to buy real estate nowadays. Some of the
here's the thing, guys, and I'm just going to say this off the bat. Somebody's going to get me angry here, but I hope my wife's not listening. In 2010, I did a contrat promesa 2 months before the whole crisis melted down, and I did the escritura anyway. This year, I did a escritura to buy a huge piece of land just before the COVID crisis. So either I'm brutally smart, and in the long run, it'll work out, or I'm brutally unlucky. I haven't figured this one out yet, but I did know one thing. I don't know enough about real estate to be doing what I'm doing. That's just me. So here I am back again, José.
In any crisis, and when this affects real estate, for example, people always panic. You have always people that goes panic and needs to do discounts, and so I have a lot of investors waiting for those people to do amazing deals. So even for the investment on real estate, I see, of course, some more institutional investors waiting for better timings, etc. But the vultures are there waiting to buy and to do some amazing deals. In the last crisis, in the beginning of the crisis, it was the best timing for the real estate. People don't have this in their minds, but it was. So I really don't believe about what the question is, because even in my area, that it was probably one that people are a little bit quiet. I see a lot of investors trying to buy. Because you still have a lot of liquidity, you still have a lot of money in the market, and people needs to put money on things. So of course they want to take advantage of all of this uncertainty, because nobody have a crystal ball, etc. But you still have people not waiting. And as entrepreneurs, we, as Filipa said, we think, and Nuno, we think differently. Because during all this process, our mind never stopped thinking about new things, how we can deal with these new projects, etc. But globally, even the investors, they are there.
Interesting. I think one of the things I was looking at is that between the two, and this is just me being an academic now, 2010 crisis, the recovery we went through, we had that weird situation of low interest rate and high liquidity, which was really supposed to, with an economic recovery. I think we might go back to some sense of normal after this crisis, whereas we're going to start to have less liquidity is going to be needed, which might get interest rates up a little bit, which might bring some normal back to our lives. All right, guys, that was the last question I've got here.
We'll have another one on the chat box. I'm sorry, Nadim, and I think this will be the last one. This one is from Isabel, and she says, I know you don't have a crystal ball. What new business, areas of business can come up from all of these new opportunities?
Okay, people, I'm going to freestyle this. Who wants to go first?
May I, just for fun? Yes, you never have a crystal ball, but I think, opportunities are identified because of personal needs sometimes, and, you're seeing some imperfections in the market that others don't. I think the basics are the same, as Nadine says, in some ways. And, if you feel yourself as a user that there is a need out in the market, I mean, I can't spell it out for you. I know, for example, why did I pivot into service departments? Because I think the need will be there. People coming here to do recon visits. Why did we start a school? Because I know the need's there with all the expats that are moving here with golden visa, non-habitual residences, international school in the middle of Lisbon. So, get out there and have a look at the opportunities. As José says, capital is out there. I mean, in America and China, and Portugal is in a much better place today when it was when Ferri and I moved, or Nadim, 20 years ago. It's a much better known place, for its entrepreneurial ecosystem, for its startup visas, and, all the simplex and government efforts to make things easier are here. So, bring your ideas out, if it's good and you can pilot test it. I mean, those things are the same, but I don't think anyone has a crystal ball to tell you, okay, these are the list of areas I would look into. I mean, I know my areas quite well, and that's what I can talk about. So.
Okay, anybody else want to contribute here?
Well, I used to say in some talks, invest in what you believe and make those you love you to cry because they think you will lost a lot of money. And I used to say this because, for example, my mother cried 3 times during my life, and those was the best investments I have made during my life. And the main reason, I suppose, is if you are investing in what you know, and you are confident on what you are doing, it's always a good time to invest. If you don't know about the field, learn before investing and prototype before investing on a large scale approach. But I think there's no good time to invest and bad time to invest. It depends on what you are doing, and there's no bad business and good business. The difference between McDonald's and the normal hamburger company, you may say, well, I want to make the biggest hamburger company in the world, or I want to make the best search engine in the world. The question is, are you able to do that or not? And do you believe you are able to do that or not?
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else want to contribute here? Sort of crystal bowling without a crystal ball.
Is there a market need?
Yeah, I mean, for me, typically entrepreneurs, they operate according to what I call market failure, you know. So Chitra believes that there's a failure in the hotel business in some aspect that Martinhal can fill. You know, Nuno believes there's a failure somewhere else. José believes there's a failure. Filipa believes that there's a failure in the way women can take care of themselves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So typically what I find many times is great entrepreneurs see failure where others don't see it. They just see that's okay, that's acceptable. And they have this restlessness to make it better. And that's really where you drive things, yeah? So what I tend to tell people is stop trying to find the genius idea and start opening your eyes to find failure, because if you see failure, then you can visualize what you want to build from it. And then it's a question of learning very steeply and moving forward. And I think that's what I've always found about great entrepreneurs.
I always say that Wink exists because I have these eyebrows.
There you
if
go.
I didn't have these eyebrows, Wink didn't exist.
No, but it's a great point, you know. Do you think anybody would have created Facebook except for a guy who couldn't make friends?
Exactly. Yeah.
Those kind of things. If you had lots of friends, Facebook's the last thing you needed. So these are the type of things I think that they're okay. I hope I'm not being listened to. This is on Facebook, right?
You are, but
Oh.
it's okay.
Yes,
All right.
you are. But you don't have Facebook anyway, so.
I don't have a Facebook. No, I don't know how that
Sorry.
works. My family doesn't think I have friends, so that's okay. But I've decided to get Instagram because I've realized my kids and my wife talk through something called a story.
Yeah, Insta story. I learned how to do Insta stories during the lockdown. Another great skill, Nadim. German cheesecake and Insta stories. There's a book in there.
I don't know what's happening in the world because they don't send me emails or call me. It's a tragic world. All right, guys. Do we have any more questions?
No more questions. I think we're done for today.
All right. So I want to say thank you to everybody. As usual, really interesting to listen to you guys. I will be bugging you guys to come speak at my MBA students, whether you like it or not. You can always say no, and then I'll just send another email. Thank you to everybody who is out there listening to us. Thank you, Frio, again for inviting me to this thing. I really enjoy working with you guys. And thank you, Elena, for organizing it with a great backdrop and some sexy music.
Our pleasure. Next time I'll fix that.
Everyone, all the best.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.